pigs did know each other. But this guy has been around SHRM for a good amount of time. I met him, he actually came to SHRM and spoke to us a while back. I don't remember what the topic was, something happened. And I was fascinated, and he's never disappointed me. After that, every time I hear him speak, it's like he gets better and better and better and better. And he started off amazing. So naturally, somebody like that becomes your favorite, right? Well, without further delay, I want to introduce to you my friend. I consider him a friend. My friend who is about to become yours. Someone who's just a nice guy, but his credentials are amazing. He's really smart, but he doesn't like loud his smartness. Not even on the smart stage where that's okay. He just talks to you and he makes it make sense. He's been involved in animal rescue for over 12 years, and he's a Bruce Springsteen, the boss, fanatic, and an excellent speaker and lawyer. My friend, about to be yours. Please join me in giving a real rousing, warm welcome for Jonathan Segal.
Thank you, my friend. Okay, I appreciate the kind words. We did start in junior high school together. I want to talk with you today about male allies and the issue in particular of sexual harassment. And when we think about it, I hear people use the term a lot, they want to be a male ally. So the first question is, what is a male ally? It's not a pin that you wear. It's not a title that you put on your Twitter profile. It's not something that you have in your head. It begins with the fundamental belief that in our organizations, for human and talent reasons, we have to make sure that equal employment opportunity, non-discrimination with regard to gender, is more than just buzzwords, that it is a reality. But it's not enough just for us to think about it, because thoughts without actions are, I don't want to say meaningless, but pretty close to it. Male allies need to be affirmative partners that step up and speak out when we see sexism, no matter what the form may be. And one of the forms that we know is persistent and pervasive. No industry is immune. No workplace can say it's totally safe, is that of sexual harassment. Now, why is it important that we have male allies, generally? Well, Sheryl Sandberg, whom you're going to have the privilege to hear tomorrow, in her groundbreaking book, Lean In, said effectively, the problem is too big in most organizations. The challenges we have are too great for half the population alone to solve them. She's right. We can't, as organizations, reach our full potential if we don't maximize the benefit of the diversity in the community. I'm talking about gender now, but it goes obviously more broadly. Well, that same issue is here when it comes to discrimination. Discrimination is a major, much more than a legal problem, but a business problem. Because it not only deprives individuals of opportunities, but it deprives organizations of their talent. Like any other business problem, we need women and men to help solve it. And that's particularly important in the context of harassment. As a legal matter, men can harass women, women can harass men, there can be same-sex harassment of either gender. But the practical reality is that in most of the high-profile cases about which we read, and the cases about which we don't read that can be as heartbreaking, it is a man with power and a woman with less so. In these situations, there's something that would be tragically ironic if we said that the responsibility to prevent and remedy harassment was left to women, when women are more often than men the victims of harassment. So men have a responsibility in this area, And in many organizations, men have disproportionate power. Power can magnify wrong, but power can also make doing what's right easier. So in 2017, Time magazine said that the person of the year were the silence breakers. In 2017, women broke the silence on the degree to which harassment was a persistent and pervasive problem. Many men have done so before and after, but 2018 needs to be the year when even more men break the silence, when even more men make sure that we have workplaces where disrespectful and harassing behavior does not survive, let alone thrive. So what does that mean we need to do? There really are, first, we need to make sure that we avoid the bad behaviors. And guys, we gotta understand that with power, the bad becomes worse the more powerful we may be by position or by influence. Position alone doesn't necessarily, lack of position doesn't mean someone doesn't have power. So I want you to think of a continuum that I constructed of bad behavior. Let's start with disrespect and incivility. That may not be unlawful, but as Johnny Taylor often says, it's unacceptable. Then we go to the next level, which may be sexually harassing, but not severe or pervasive enough, at least under federal law, to be unlawful. The inappropriate comment on appearance, the offensive joke. Then we get to sexual harassment, where it is unlawful, demanding sex for promotion, grabbing a woman's breasts, which then leads to the last issue, which really could be the example I just gave, sexual assault. Every employer should be thinking of that continuum, because what our corrective action is needs to be prompt and proportionate. How bad it is will determine what our corrective action should be, and power means not only that we should expect more, but then the corrective action needs to go along with that expectation. But it's not enough simply to avoid the bad behaviors along the continuum. We need, as men, to make sure that we model respectful behavior. And sometimes it may be implicit bias, sometimes it may be even conscious bias. But we need to think more about the things that aren't necessarily harassing per se, but that send a cultural message that women aren't equal partners, as a result of which harassing behavior is more likely to occur. The talking over a woman when she raises a point, when 3 women raise an issue and the one man does, the one man being called out for his contribution. Unless we model respectful behavior, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't raise issues where we have disagreements. We can disagree civilly, but if the respect isn't there, then everything else we talk about really can't happen. We need to be approachable so that individuals can come to us if they have concerns. We hear people saying, I want to be involved, I want to do more, I know I need to do more. Well, one of the ways that everyone can do more, regardless of gender, is to be visible in your organizations so that people see you and know you and will hopefully get to like you and understand that you're a person who is respectful to them, and therefore they can expect respect when they raise what may be the hardest decision they'll ever make, whether or not to raise a concern. We've all dealt with cases where there is no merit, and occasionally there are cases where we may even question why the person brought it. But I also want to tell you, 75% of people who experience what they perceive to be harassing conduct don't. They suffer in silence, or they leave and they join a competitor. We want to do what's right for them to prevent harm. We want to make our organization stronger culturally. In order for us to get there, we need to be accessible so they can raise concerns. When someone raises a concern with us because we're visible, We need to have top of mind what our response is going to be. That doesn't sound like Greg is dismissive. That sounds like Greg isn't much better. That's an admission. We shouldn't be focusing on how we feel, but the person who comes before us. It should be, thank you for raising your concerns with me. I thank you for raising your concerns with me. They're serious, and I want you to know we take them very seriously. Then explain the process, then thank them again. Unless we, and those who work with us, we train on what to say, then people may, without bad intent, say the wrong thing. But you in HR are often the gatekeeper, and people need to know that when they come to you, that doesn't mean that they're going to get what they want, because not every complaint has merit. But every complaint must be treated seriously, and every complainant must be given, treated with dignity and respect, and that includes thanking them for coming to you. It is an act of courage. But you can't wait for someone to come to you, because if you are in a position of leadership or influence, and that includes everybody here, then you're doing nothing is a problem. Although I'm a recovering litigator, I still handle charges. And sometimes I hear leaders say, you don't understand, I didn't do anything. To which I respond, you don't understand, that's exactly why you're here. We can't be passive bystanders in HR. That's the notion of complicity. In many of these high-profile cases about which we read, in many of the cases that I have seen, people knew what was going on, but didn't say something. They were afraid to do so. They weren't sure how to do so. You have to do what's right, and yes, sometimes there is a risk in speaking up, but you can't ignore it. Think of, maybe I shouldn't give an example, but I'm going to, Charlie Rose. On the set, he wasn't wearing clothing. Now, I don't know what the dress code was, but I assume it included clothes. So somewhere in the process, I gotta believe that someone noticed it, unless no one was wearing clothes, and then we got even a bigger problem going on. But yet, no one said anything until it got to the media. If your employees see you walk by and do nothing, then there are two wrongs, and the second wrong is the bigger one. They may accept, not like, but accept someone saying or doing something that's inappropriate, but they won't accept, nor should they, you're ignoring it. So if you're in a situation and you see it or hear it, ordinarily, not always, you want to do something in the moment. But sometimes in the moment, people say the wrong thing. There's a sexist comment made, and then the man or woman looks to the one woman in the room and says, I'm sorry, he didn't mean that. Problem in so many different ways. Number one, how do you know he didn't mean that? And number two, you made the focus her and not him. So if you want to be a bystander that has strength in creating a culture of respect, look at the person who made the comment that's inappropriate, not the person that you think is more likely or most likely to be offended by it. And by the way, you don't need to be a woman to be offended by sexism, any more than to be a person of color to be offended by racism. We don't want to send the message that if that person weren't there, it would somehow be okay. It's not. The comment I would recommend, and again, keep it simple. Not okay. Stop. We'll talk about it later. You want people that are present to know then and there, in the moment, that you won't tolerate inappropriate conduct, and that you get it. The corrective action can be later, but it's important to signal there so that others know. You know, we hear a lot of people saying sometimes it's hard in these cases because you can't tell people exactly what the corrective action is, and sometimes you can't, and oftentimes you shouldn't. But if people see you as an active bystander, someone who signals without going into detail, not okay, that's offensive to me, stop. Then later when you say, I've taken corrective action, the person is more likely to believe you when you say it was more than just a informal corrective counseling. Now, one of the other things that we got to make sure is if you are a male ally and in your organization, you got to make sure that your executives understand this. So many times when HR does the right thing, and HR can only do the right thing if it has the support of other leaders. HR plays a critical role in, but does not own civility. We cannot do it alone. For far too long, I've seen too many publications trash HR and not understand how many cases HR has successfully handled matters where the person who was harmed was protected and the person who did wrong was appropriately dealt with. That doesn't make interesting headlines. At the same time, we all in HR can up our game a bit and be a little more thoughtful about how we deal with these kinds of issues. None of us is perfect, but we can't do it alone. So we need to make sure that our leaders, those who are on the C-suite, support us. And one of the worst things they can do is cut off our legs by saying, well, HR made me do this. Or, well, this is coming from HR. It's critical that we let our leaders know that when someone reports to them and that person is engaged in inappropriate, harassment, or worse behavior, that they need to provide the corrective action. We can write the talking points, we can be there, but if people want to lead, then they have to be responsible, and that includes delivering hard messages to people who've engaged in a continuum of unacceptable behavior. No matter how open we want to be, and I don't care what the policy says, we can talk forever about non-retaliation, but unless we ensure that non-retaliation is a reality, then the complaint procedure will not be utilized. I dealt with one company and they said with pride, you know, we haven't had any complaints of harassment since October 5 when the allegations against Weinstein broke for the first time. Isn't that wonderful? No, it's not. If your complaint procedure is never used, then that may mean people don't have trust in it. If it's used every day, 4 times an hour, that may not be so good either. But you want people to feel comfortable in using it. In order to do that, you need to reboot your efforts on retaliation, on anti-retaliation, and make sure that people understand that it's not only the things that are the obvious, firing someone or not giving someone a good evaluation, but it's the day-to-day interactions. If someone who raises a complaint or supports someone who does is treated fine in business meetings, but ignored for the rest of the day, doesn't receive the hello, doesn't receive the goodbye, never a thank you, then it's almost existential that person doesn't exist, and that message will resound in your workplace. And then finally, I end, and it's an area where I ask you as a challenge. There are individuals who are saying, I don't know what to do today. I am unsure of the gray, the hugs, the compliments, the travel. I want to avoid situations that could create problems. And that may mean men avoiding women. There's a word for that that's called discrimination. We need to stop harassment and we need to maximize inclusion at the same time. The charge is easy. The charge is easy to articulate, but very hard to do. I ask you to go back to your workplaces and please focus on that issue. Thank you for the privilege of being with you today.